What's up, man? How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good, man. So I actually got someone reached out to me and was like, hey, man, you really need to have this guy on the podcast. And I was like, well, I'm like, well, I can't really find much information about this fella, you know, like, is this a good or bad thing? And he kind of gave me a quick synopsis of, you know, what you've done or whatever. And I was like, okay, well, yeah, that should be interesting. So, man, yeah.
Well, dude, I'm glad to be here. Kind of saw some of your stuff, especially after Brian kind of reached out and told me about you. Started looking. A lot of my friends were on here. Super good podcast. Glad to be here.
Yeah, man. So tell me about you. Like, how did you get into, I guess, the military and that ride, and then we'll lead into the other stuff we were talking about before we started.
Yeah. Man, so went to airline high school here in Bossier. Graduated. Very, very brief stint at Bossier Parish Community College, and then decided I was going to do what I'd kind of always wanted to do. Signed up with the Marine Corps, did 4 years in the infantry, got one, kind of big overseas deployment to Afghanistan during that 4 years. Came back, did a Scout Sniper NDOC, tried out for a Scout Sniper Platoon, got picked up, spent about 2.5 years over there. Never went to Marine Scout Sniper School. Are you familiar with, like, Marine Scout Snipers at all?
Man, not really. I mean, not just other than basically what it entails when you say it, No.
So it's kind of like there's a kind of a tradition there where you've got, once you go to school as a Marine Scout Sniper, you're a hog. You're a hunter of gunmen. That's what that stands for.
Okay.
Before you go to school, you're a pig. You're like a professionally instructed gunman. So I spent 2.5 years there as a pig, never quite getting my chance to go prove myself at Scout Sniper School. Got frustrated with that, got frustrated with the Marine Corps pretty much in general. Around that time, 2014, was when General Amos was the commandant of the Marine Corps. It was our first non-infantry commandant. Had this he wrote a letter called The Great Awakening, and it was pretty much going over how the Marine Corps had fallen asleep at 20 years of war, and we needed to get back to discipline of haircuts and all the regulations and wearing a proper uniform, and it just got crazy. There's a phenomenal anonymous response written to the commandant that pretty much said, if anyone has fallen asleep in the last 20 years of war, it's been our officer corps and our generals. Our lower level enlisted fighters have been winning the battle on the battlefield for the last 20 years. And we've learned that having my haircut and having too many tattoos doesn't make me, not qualified to fight in combat. If anything, it's just a distraction. Anyways, so I got frustrated with kind of the leadership of the Marine Corps and where that was going at the time. Made a big change. Went and tried out for 20th Special Forces Group. It's a National Guard Green Berets.
Gotcha.
It's the Army's best kept secret, in my opinion. I did not know that it existed. I actually went to active duty recruiters. Man, I kind of started reading through, did I want to be a SEAL? Did I want to be a Green Beret? Did I want to be a Ranger? Kind of just spent a lot of time on that while I was at the Sniper Platoon, figuring out what my next step was going to be. What kind of landed me on Green Berets was, I read a book, The Untold Stories of Mac v. SOG. It's Green Berets in Vietnam, kind of our first Tier 1 unit.
My great uncle was actually
really
Green Beret stationed in Vietnam. He won't talk about any of it.
Well,
unfortunately, I would love him to, but yeah.
I would love to get a chance to sit down with him.
Maybe you could get him to talk about it,
But man, I read that book, and it was like, my mind was blown. Like, that was my first introduction to that. I didn't know that existed. I was like, dude, if this is what being a Green Beret is, that's where I want to go.
Yeah.
So I actually went to an active duty recruiter, tried to get in. And at the time, I'd been in for 6 years in the Marine Corps, in the infantry, in a sniper platoon. And they're like, well, have you ever been arrested for an alcohol-related incident? And I was like, yeah, dude, did you not hear me? I've been in the Marine Corps for 6 years. And they're like, no, well, then you can't try out for SF. And I was like, I got super frustrated. I was just calling random people trying to find out a way. Finally got a hold of what seemed like a used car salesman in the middle of nowhere, Mississippi. And he's like, man, come on down. Come on down to 20 Special Forces Street. Man, I went. It was incredible. It was mind-boggling how difficult the tryout was. Because there was you try it at the unit. Then once they decide that they'll pick you up, then you come aboard. Had to join the Mississippi National Guard.
What does that look like tryouts? What, when you say that I feel like that's probably underselling it.
Well, so there's an official Army regulated school, and that is the Special Forces Assessment and Selection, SFAS. SFAS is 3 weeks. The standards themselves, you can Google the standards of what they are. But pretty much you have, it changes slightly from class to class, from year to year, depending on who's in charge there, and depending on apparently what the political pressure is at the time. But at the end of the day, it kind of results in we're so understaffed.
Yeah.
We cannot get enough people joining Special Forces. Not enough people want to do it. And then also with our generation, there's not enough people who actually can do those things.
Yeah.
But it's pretty much a week of physical events, whether it's an Army physical fitness test, pull-ups, push-ups, a 2-mile run, 5-mile run, 6-mile ruck, which is, running with a backpack on, roughly, I don't know what the standard is now, 45 pounds dry.
Yeah.
At the time that I went through, it was 45 dry, 2 MREs, and 6 quarts of water. And then, so it comes out to roughly I think it was 67 pounds or 70 pounds-ish. 6-mile ruck, 12-mile ruck. Land navigation, which is one that gets guys a lot. So same thing, you have that same exact 65, 70-pound backpack on, and at night, during the day, whatever, you're by yourself, not allowed to talk to anybody. You don't have a watch. You don't know what that timeline is looking like. It's just an individual assessment of how fast you think you can go. And you're moving very, very long distances with a map and a compass.
Which is unheard of. Most people don't have that skill or knowledge anymore.
What I've kind of learned is, man, that's really just an opportunity to self-select.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get lost. At some point, you're going to get a little bit turned around and be like, oh, dude, I'm an idiot because I'm a little sleep deprived and I'm a little tired. And I can tell you from my experience, I had a rough one on one of my events. It wasn't at selection. It was later on in my career. But I can tell you, I had a time where I had an instructor pull up on a road, and I saw him coming. We wear little trackers in our backpack so they can see where we are. At the time, I didn't think that they could see who I was. So I just ran off in the woods, and I was like, oh, if you want me, you're going to have to call me out of here.
Yeah.
And the dude was like, Hill, come here. I was like, oh, man, this is not good. That's my name. So I walk up there. He was like, hey, man, get in the truck. You're done. I was like, nope. No, I'm not getting in the truck. And he's like, get in the truck. I was like, no, dude, I'm not getting in this truck. I'm not done. He's like, dude, you are lost. You are bad lost. I was like, no. It's like, you're not even on the map of where you're supposed to be right now. I was like, no, I'm not getting in the truck, dude. Until time is up, I'm going to keep training, Dude was like, okay, well, what's your plan? I said, well, I'm going to run in a cardinal direction until I figure out where I'm at. And I hit an identifying feature that I'm like, oh, God, I'm way off, but here's where I'm at on the map. He's like, well, which way are you going to run? I just shrugged my shoulders and pointed well, one of these is probably going to be pretty close. I'll point this way, and he's like, I'd go that way. I was like, all right. And I ended up eventually finding my way and figuring it out and making that work and coming in under time. But I was way, way, way off the map. But it's just a lot of people, it's kind of what you're going to do in those moments of, hey, I'm lost. Am I going to keep pushing on, or am I going to stop and be like, oh, this is it for me? Most guys are physically in shape enough to finish that course. It's the mental assessment when you're alone, in the dark, in the woods, that gets guys. But yeah, there's that. And then at the end, there's team week, which is rough, man. there's tons of videos out there that you can see. I think it's 21 Days in Hell or 2 Weeks in Hell. I can't remember what the documentary name is anymore.
Did you pull that up, Josh? Was it 21 Days in Hell or 2 Weeks in Hell? The documentary. We're just going to see so we can verify the title of that if people want to check it out.
And that is like going over what Special Forces assessment and selection is.
Gotcha.
And it like actually shadows people going through.
Well, what is this? So doing this and then...
It might not be it. No, that's a different book. Hold on.
Feels fine.
21 days.
21 days. Yeah, if it's 21 minutes, bro.
Try 14, man. I'm sorry. It might have used to have been 14 days, or they only aired 14 days, but school itself is 3 weeks. Dude, I can't.
It has to do with COVID.
Well,
We'll figure it out.
We'll figure it out. He can keep looking while we're talking about it. But so I guess the question is, doing all that, what's the responsibilities? Like, first off, like, you made a decision. So I guess it was like you hadn't given up on working, like doing what you wanted to do, right? You just made a decision to where I wanted to transition into something because either this wasn't working out for me or this wasn't what I thought it wanted to be, but you were still committed to the cause, I guess.
Man, me and my buddies kind of talk about this all the time. I call it chasing the dragon.
Okay.
It's kind of like we were talking earlier before we started about you training, fighting and stuff.
Yeah.
It's kind of the same thing where like I joined the Marine Corps thinking, man, number one, I was like a true believer. I was like a patriot. I think everybody should serve their country and yada yada. And as a young child, like,
what instilled that though? Like, is it just something like? Did you watch a movie? Like, well, like everyone has shit, or like, was it previous family members or?
I really don't know.
Yeah.
So I said I was going to join the Army. There's like, home videos of me being like 6 and being like, I'm going to join the Army when I grow up, and just telling, like, fabricating Army stories.
Yeah, but people say that as a kid, and like, I want to be a cop, or whatever, and then that goes away, right?
It never did. For
Yeah.
me. I think when I was like 13 or 14, I had a cousin who joined the Marine Corps, and he came back from Marine Corps boot camp in like dress blues, and he comes back. As a matter of fact, it's Brock Dowden, the owner of Alpha Roofing.
Okay.
Here locally. He comes back from boot camp, and I run into him, and I'm like, dude, well, what is this? And he's like, oh, it's join the Marine Corps. And I was like, oh, what is that? I'm 13. There's no internet at the time. You can't just Google all this stuff. So he's like, it's like the Army, but better. From then on, I was like, oh, I'm joining the
Marines. Yeah.
I just trusted his word completely on that. But I joined the Marine Corps Infantry thinking, oh, this is what I need to, like, I'm going to go. Not to mention, we all grew up during 9/11.
Yeah, so like that was a huge
like
time for everyone. Yeah, everyone was like, okay. First, the entire country collaborated, which was amazing to see that to be in a moment in time to where you can see an entire nation come together against an opposing force, at least like spiritually, like spiritually, or like at least camaraderie. Like you saw that, and I could see where that would say, okay, well, I want to do this.
I can't think of another time when we were more unified as a country.
Yeah.
I mean, obviously, World War II, before, I'm a big history buff, and studying that, after Pearl Harbor, there was no one that was like, oh, I don't know. I don't think we should get involved.
Yeah.
And the same was true for 9/11, especially, man, I was young. I was in middle school. That happened while I was at school.
Same here.
And every person that I knew was devastated. We all came together. We were praying for each other. People that didn't like each other on different sides of the aisle politically came together, and that was I think for me it was just, I said that as a young kid, but every so many years there was some form of, whether you want to call that a coincidence or like a God driving me to my purpose kind of thing, which there was some form of like incident that kind of drove me even further, kind of piqued my interest and drove me even further towards that career path. But the reasons you join for aren't necessarily the reasons you stay for. And that's what, like, talking about going from the Marine Corps infantry to a sniper platoon to going to the Green Berets. It's just, during my deployment to Afghanistan, I felt like it was more man, how can we go kick the hornet's nest? How can we, like, we wanted to kill the bad guys, but I also, man, I saw good people there too. Like in Afghanistan, there were some weird interactions for me where, like, I saw, you know, little kids would come out. We'd be patrolling through some farmer's field. Little kids would be out there, and I'd give them some candy. And I'd see their dad, like, start yelling at them. And I'm like, oh, come on, man, don't do that.
Yeah.
Kids run off inside. 5-10 minutes later, they come out, and they've got, like, this big homemade bread, like that naan bread, and it's incredible, by the way, especially if you've been eating MREs for months and months on end. But, like, this homemade bread that they come bringing out, and I kind of realized, like, what the dad was saying was like, hey, if he's going to give you something, you go in the kitchen, you get him something, you give it back.
Got you. Exactly
what my grandfather would have done if somebody would have gave me something for free as a young kid. But, like, I saw good people there. Albeit with different set of cultures, different morals, different ethics. And I just felt like we weren't making a difference. Like, for every bad guy that you kill, if you're not building rapport with the local populace, you're probably just creating, his sons are going to grow up to be terrorists.
Exactly, yeah.
And then another conversation that we had pretty frequently while I was there was, I mean, dude, we all grew up watching, guys from the South, we grew up watching Cowboys and Indians movies. We grew up watching, you know, all that stuff. And we idolize, I know I idolized both sides at some point growing up, of the Cowboys and the Indians. But, like, starting to break down the Afghanistan conflict, like, there's teenagers here that are 16, 17, 18 years old. They only know war at this point. And they don't know anything about why this started, or they don't know anything about 9/11. Is all that they know is that this dude is standing on my front porch. He just killed my dad for whatever reason. I really don't care. Yeah. Like, as soon as I can, I'm going to take up arms against
And rightfully so, if that's all you know.
Yeah.
You know?
And so, to me, that's what I wanted. I wanted to feel like I was making a difference. That was what started the hunt for what was the next best, what could make me better at my job, more efficient, more effective, kind of narrow down what the peers that I was surrounded with. I met some incredible dudes in the infantry, and I love the guys that I met. As a matter of fact, some of the best leadership that I ever got to work with was from that unit, my first infantry unit. A guy named Bobby Dickerson and a guy named Don Gay honestly kind of formed what my leadership style would be for the rest of my career. 17 years later, I get back from my last deployment, and those are the two guys that I called to say, man, I just thank you. You know, you guys, whenever I was in doubt, I kind of pretended to be you, and it worked out for me really well. So leaving the sniper platoon, I sat down and did like a deep dive on, you know, what is a Navy SEAL and what's their mission? What is an Army Ranger and what is their mission? What is the culture there? What is the Green Berets were the ones that, you know, their motto, De Oppresso Liber, to free the oppressed. Like that stuck with me. That was like, hey man, go make a difference. And especially at the time when I was reading through all this, they weren't just doing kind of what their actual mission set is, which is by, with, and through. You know, you take 12 special forces guys, they can take up to 1,500 or more local forces, recruit, train them, equip them, pay them, and then go out and overthrow a government. Yeah. But they weren't just doing that at the time. They were doing a lot of unilateral stuff. They were doing direct action, go kill or capture missions all by themselves as just 12 dudes. They were doing all those things that you see a Navy SEAL or an Army Ranger do, and also they were doing the village stability
operations. The PR work, man.
The winning over the hearts and minds.
Yeah.
And
with good intent too, it seems, you know, so.
That sounds different. Winning over the hearts and minds and like training up. Afghanistan is a super complex environment. And so people identify more as with the village that they're in than they do with like, oh, I'm a member of the country of Afghanistan. They're tribesmen, they're tribes people. And to go in and try to like change the idea behind that culture, it's not, it might have good intentions behind it, but that's not going to work out. Yeah. And so it's just it kind of also pointed out like the short-sightedness of our politicians and of our political system, when you're changing leadership every 4 years, and then they're just going to reverse the policies of the people in front of them because they were Democrat and this guy's a Republican. It's just, our adversaries do not have 4-year foreign policy strategies. They have 100-year foreign policy strategies. And just seeing the waste of war, seeing the waste of life, waste of resources, the lack of forethought in the way that we were doing war, I wanted to be a part of that at a bigger level and make more of a difference. And in my opinion, the Green Berets were the best way to do that. Yeah, that's kind of what led me to that.
Right. And so what year are you in service at that point when you make that transition? I guess once you go through all the prerequisites and everything and then get accepted, I guess, or however that works.
So I had been in the Marine Corps for 6 years, transferred over to Army Special Forces in 2014. So that's, 10 years later now. I've been with the Green Berets for almost 11 years.
Gotcha.
I actually did a conditional release in 2013, had to get a 1-star general to sign off on it, went and tried out at my unit, came back, finished out my contract to my full 6 years, and then went. Complicated process, but 2014 is when I came over and went to actual Special Forces assessment selection, airborne school, so learning how to jump out of airplanes, and then attending the Special Forces qualification course. The Special Forces qualification course changes in length, but it's a 2-year pipeline of school after school after school. And at the very end, you get, I'd say, 2 to 3 year pipeline, depending on what your job is. But at the end of that, that's when they give you your Special Forces tab and your Green Beret, and you graduate and go to a team. What that consists of is pretty much another condensed selection all over again, because you're constantly being assessed.
Is this like amongst physical, psychological, like conditioning, everything? Like,
yeah. And so a lot of it is they give you the room, right? There's only one MOS, military occupational specialty, like military job, that's longer than being a Green Beret, and that is to be a fighter pilot. It takes more time to train a fighter pilot than it does anybody else in the military. And then the second longest training school that there is to be a basically trained Green Beret. That doesn't include all of the follow-on schools, right, and the sniper and the Sephardic or Halo school or any of that stuff. That's just to be a basic training for Green Berets. It takes 2 years. If you're a medic, that's an additional, Special Forces medic, that's an additional 9 months pretty much on top of that you have to go through. So, I mean, you're looking at 3 years. You're looking at almost a full enlistment.
Before you can even do
anything.
Yeah.
You're not on a team.
Not to mention you've already put in 6.
Yep. So, and that was a weird thing for me just because the Marine Corps is pretty slow to promote people.
Yeah.
The Army is pretty fast to promote people. So I was showing up at a school where I was like an E4. I was went from being a non-commissioned officer in the Marine Corps, I was a corporal, to showing up to, and a lot is expected of an E4 in the Marine Corps, to showing up to the Army and I was an E4, and pretty much they're just looking for you to participate.
Yeah.
So it was pretty interesting because I'd be in a platoon of guys and everybody would be E6s. And I'm like, oh man, how long have you been in? And they're like, oh, I've been in for 4 years. I'm like, wait, what? All of you are getting paid way more than me, and I've been in for way longer than you. I really started to regret some of my life choices. But at the same time, it went really well, man. I really enjoyed the Special Forces qualification course. Maybe not in its entirety. There were definitely some segments that I did not like. But, dude, SEER school was freaking incredible. I was, growing up here and being out in the woods, I felt like I was 12 again.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, I'm getting paid to go and try to find food, and this is awesome. And then, I'm an 18 Bravo, so that 4 months of being at an 18 Bravo course where I'm just learning, it's a weapons and tactics specialist, where I learned everything from small arms to, mortars to artillery to anti-tank, any foreign or domestic weapon system. I'm become a complete specialist in.
Not to mention you already had all the sniper experience too. Yeah, so if some shit goes down, I'm calling you.
Well, man, that was a blast. I mean, once you get past the school side of it, and you're just learning the tactics, and you're getting all the reps that you can with the tactics, and shooting MP5s, and that's super fun.
Yeah, I bet.
Shooting javelin missiles. But from there, leaving the Q course, man, showing up to my team once again, it was kind of like, Marine Corps infantry. You show up, you have no clue what your job is, and you're like looking up to all these guys. You're aspiring to be like them. You're seeing what behaviors get rewarded, what behaviors get like extremely punished. If you're too aggressive, they're like, hey, here's a slap on the wrist. Hey, that was too aggressive. But if you're too timid, they will crush you.
Yeah.
So you're like, okay, well, aggression is rewarded. Like that is what we're fostering here is aggression. And then you show up to a sniper platoon, and they're like, but over 4 years, you work your butt off and become above average, and now you kind of stand out. You've built a name for yourself in the infantry. And then you leave and you go to sniper platoon. You start all the way over. Like, okay, well, I need extreme aggression in my back pocket, but also I need to be very professional here. Like, I need to be the spitting image of professionalism when I'm in a uniform. And when I'm out in the bush, man, I need patience. I need to understand my trade craft and what my skills are and hone those skills. So shooting is only 10% of being a sniper. It's mainly reconnaissance. And just fielding and honing that craft. And eventually, after 2.5 years, I kind of built a name for myself and had a good reputation there, and then kind of balled that up and threw it in the trash and went to Special Forces. And then once again, you're taking all these people who came from all different walks of life, and they're all figuring out what their job is, looking for what attitudes are rewarded here and what is punished and what's just a little slap on the wrist, and figuring out their limits. But 99% of these dudes were way above average at their old units.
Got you.
So now you're like, I'm struggling to be in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
And then you finally, after 2.5 years, at the very end, I felt like I'd started to make a name and a reputation for myself there, and kind of set myself a little bit above that middle of the pack. And then you show up to a team, and there's legitimate, like my first team, man, I had absolute legends on my SF team, and I was completely blown away. And then once again, I'm like, dude, how in the hell am I ever going to fit in here? Like, I'm not going to be, I thought I was going to be the best at tactics and weapons, but like, I'm not even the best at that. And there's a dude who's legitimately redesigning the Army's tactics and selling it back to the Army as a PowerPoint presentation. Like what the Army's metric is for these battle drills, he's redesigning them and selling it back to them. I'm like, I'm not going to be able to compete there. Like, finding out how I was going to fit in, once again, it just forced me to like work my butt off to find a way to like be slightly above average, if you will. And it was very, very difficult, but it was incredible. Just constantly being surrounded by amazing people, constantly being not the best dude in the room, not the smartest dude in the room, not the hardest working dude in the room, and just trying to find a way to change that. It forced me to build good habits. It forced me to like be a totally different individual, honestly.
Yeah. And then from there, you hit the field.
So, yeah, showing up to an SF team, it's incredible. I had a team sergeant who like jumped into Panama in the 90s. I mean, just incredible individual, absolute legend. Had a captain who had turned down Major 4 times because he just wanted to stay on a team as a team captain. The most experienced captain that I've ever worked with was an SF captain. All these guys sat down with my team sergeant in my initial counseling. I'm like, hey man, do you want me to go to like Ranger school or, anything you want me to go to prove myself to the team before I start going to cool guy schools? And I freaking love him, man. He's an incredible leader, but older guy, super unassuming. But he just sat there and he's like, what? No, man, I went to Ranger School in 1989. He's like, girls are doing it now. He's like, you just got done with Green Beret boot camp. I want you to go learn skills to make us more lethal in a combat zone. And so, man, from that, even though I was National Guard SF, it was a constant it was my full-time job. So all I did was I went school to deployment, and did that for as long as I possibly could.
How many deployments do you have under your belt now?
6 deployments with SF and 1 with the Marine Corps.
What's the worst one? I'm sure they all have their ups and downs, but like
for
area
for a totally different set of reasons.
Yeah,
my last one was my worst one, and I just got back roughly 4 months ago.
Okay,
but yeah, just a totally different set of reasons than probably what most people would expect. But it was my first time with. It's one thing to have bad leadership at different levels of the political system or even in my unit, but I had always had a super tight, super close team. We valued, man, I'm a big time reader. I don't know if you've ever read the book Sebastian Junger wrote on Tribe. It's called Tribe.
No, but I was reading I saw notes on that the other day. Will you pull that one up? Because I was say the other day, it's a couple of months ago. That's interesting you brought that book up. I'm not a reader. Me and Josh, he talks shit on me all the time. I'm a listener, so I have to take it in audibly because if I sit down and read, dude, I just like zone out and like I can't.
What do you want to look at?
What's the name of the book?
It's Sebastian Junger,
yeah.
Tribe,
yeah.
It kind of goes through like how humans are meant to be. And I actually started reading that book because I'd had a Marine Corps buddy of mine that was like my best friend in the whole entire world. And I just watched him. We came back from our first deployment, and a deployment that we saw some combat, but it didn't affect me the same as it affected him. And I couldn't understand that. And I watched him, struggle with PTSD. I watched him kind of recluse and like seclude himself from us. And I watched him throw his life away, honestly, get bad off on drugs, throw away his marriage, throw away his house. And just, there was nothing I could do. Like I can't make those decisions for him.
Yeah.
And I just couldn't comprehend. Man, I struggled with it for a long time. As a matter of fact, while I was in the Q course, I called him every day for a year. For 12 months, I called him every single day, and he never answered. It was like my routine of on my way to work, I'd hit call, put it on speakerphone. I knew that he wasn't going to answer. When he didn't answer, I'd leave him a voicemail if I could, or if his voicemail was full, probably from me, I would just hang up and then move on. But man, Sebastian Junger went on a deployment with an Army unit, and I can't remember who it was, but filmed the deal. I can't remember. I can't remember which movie it was. I'm going to confuse him.
He'll figure it out.
But he spent a long time with this Army unit while they were deployed, and then kind of did the same thing. He's like, okay, well, let's touch base with all these guys that I built this crazy, incredible relationship with. Yeah, Restrepo,
yeah.
So I thought it was. I just didn't want to get it wrong. Yeah, so that was in the Korengal Valley at Restrepo. It was a very intense combat deployment for them. When they came back, some guys were unfazed. Some guys were doing the same thing. They were in a complete spiral. And the guys were in a complete spiral. It wasn't like it wasn't like someone that was mentally weak or.
Yeah.
This is a strong, capable dude. And my buddy, who's also from this area, he was a stud. He was. If I was going to handpick a couple of guys to be in a gunfight with me versus anyone, he would have been one of the guys that I would have picked. And I could not wrap my head around it. And I loved him immensely, man. And it just bothered me that I couldn't figure out why. And like, why was I untouched or unfazed? And I think everybody coming back from an intense deployment you're gonna be
right.
Different.
But you're saying on a whole nother level.
But I had after a couple of months of like getting readjusted, I was back to, nobody would know. Maybe I was just better at hiding it, and he couldn't fake it. I don't know. But that's kind of where I learned this book was in a pursuit of trying to figure out what was the difference there. And he does go into the relationship of PTSD and societies. It's an incredibly awesome book, by the way.
I'm gonna have to check that out. Like
he goes into if you're a listener, I'll just go for it. But
yeah,
he kind of goes into like, hey, look at the PTSD rates from the global war on terror, okay, and why is that? Then he's like, well, let's look at Israel. Israel is in constant conflict, right? What's their PTSD rate? It's like 0.001%.
Yeah. Okay,
let's look at American Indians. American Indians were brutal, tomahawk to tomahawk, pretty much machete fights, bow and arrows. Their family was involved. 0.0001%. Like there's very, very few times that they talk about someone not being able to mentally continue on after this battle or whatever. Okay, why is that? Let's look at World War II. Shell-shocked. Like super low numbers. Even though you would think...
Do you think that, and I'm not arguing, but do you also think that not being reported is kind of skews those numbers a little bit too?
No, and I'll tell you why. Like he kind of explains why that is.
Okay.
And this is why I believe in kind of what he said. But it's look at as a whole, Israel suffers that war together as a society. Every single person that's there, when they get rocketed, it's not just the soldiers, it's the people.
Yeah.
They all experience some level of sacrifice for that conflict. If you look at the American Indians, dude, when the rival tribe came, they didn't just attack the warriors. It was the women and the children.
Yeah, right.
So they all experienced that together. World War II, for the first time, women had to hit the workforce in mass, right? Sugar, butter, dairy, that was limited. Metal was limited.
Yeah.
You were rationed those things. So everyone had some form of sacrifice. There was a curfew. There was, people weren't just living their life like normal and then like, oh yeah, Iraq, we went there for oil, right? Like that wasn't how it worked. Like
that makes sense.
Whereas if you look at these wars where life goes on, zero change.
Yeah, we don't know the difference.
Unless your direct relative is in the war, or unless for some reason you're political and you're paying attention to it. And even then, you're not actually sacrificing. You're just going about life on a normal basis, and other dudes are dying for a cause that you don't even know much about.
Yeah.
You heard it on the news, and now you're just regurgitating it. Or your dad said it, so you're just regurgitating your dad's opinion. But you didn't actually sacrifice anything for it. So when you come back and you're trying to find your way in society, it creates this huge gap in between you and average people, because life is meant to be hard and struggles are meant to be had. And I think war can be a terrible thing, and war is a terrible thing. But it's creating a divide in a society that doesn't sacrifice at all.
Yeah.
Versus people who sacrificed a lot.
Yeah. And even it's unfortunate, man, but it's that saying where it's like we're at a point now in society to where everything's just we've worked this hard to get to where it's this comfortable, right? And there's fewer and fewer people that are willing to sacrifice, just willingly do it voluntarily, because if they just stay here and do the day to day, they don't really have to. It's not a you have to go do this so that your village survives, or you not have to go do this to represent your country because they're dependent upon you. Not only they are dependent upon you, but there's no value in it,
Yeah.
To them, not you, but
no. Trust me, dude. It's wild to me because the goal shouldn't be comfort. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think that our republic was founded for comfort. Like, we weren't given God-given rights and saying, hey, the government didn't give you these. The British government doesn't have the capacity to grant or deny these rights because they're God-given. You can't say that and then say, but you don't need to be educated if you're going to vote. Yeah. That's not important.
Yeah.
You don't be educated about who you're voting for and what their policies are. Just vote based on public opinion.
Yeah.
Like it is not just a right, it's a responsibility. And that's where we've gone from from, you know, look at who signed the Declaration of Independence and how old were these dudes? These dudes were, and what kind of deaths did they die?
Yeah.
Like, they were willing to put it all on the line at a young age.
Yeah, they were young, man. And people don't know that. They don't realize that, like, most of those people in that room were, like, less than 30 years old. You know what I mean? And knew what war was. Yeah.
And were prepared to start it.
Yeah.
You know, there's some incredible stories. I'm a history buff, man. I could go into
Dude, I love it,
but that's my biggest concern with, like, what we've come to as a society today is, like, man, one of the things that drove me super insane, this is actually right after coming back from my first deployment, and I had a girl tell me, it was a friend of my wife now, my fiance at the time, tell me that she was voting for someone because Angelina Jolie said she was voting for him.
Don't get me started.
And I just, like, I had like a little twitch in my eyeball, and I'm like, dude, what have we come to that you're like, well, I'm in college, so I'm way more educated than you. Like, you went to war, but that's not a big deal. And Angelina Jolie said, I'm voting for this guy for president. I'm like, dude, that can't exist. Like, it is a right as much as it is a responsibility. Just like if the Second Amendment is your God-given right, then your that means that my personal safety is my own responsibility. So I'm gonna carry a handgun, or I'm gonna carry something to protect myself and my family and an innocent bystander if I have to. But my responsibility is then to train with that handgun and to get good with that, so that I can implement it appropriately.
And I've had these conversations with multiple people on this show, off this show, people who experience, you know, deployments and war and death and all these things. And it's always interesting to talk to you guys and to realize that you put that on a pedestal, those rights, because you've seen both sides of it. Unfortunately, a lot of people have never seen any other side of it, and so they don't respect it. And that's what's unfortunate, because we've all your sacrifice and all your predecessors' sacrifices have awarded them the comfort and the not having to worry about those things, which then makes them jaded of anything, because they don't know any conflict and they don't know any resolution and they don't know the responsibility for these things and these sacrifices, and it just makes it a huge unnecessary argument, and frustrating, rightfully so, especially from someone like who's had experiences like you have, you know?
Well, so one of the things, like, have you ever seen, like, or known a rich kid who, like, had a great life, but his life is terrible?
Right.
And you can't tell him
of course.
any other way. But it's because in the lack of, like, when there is no conflict, you're going to create your own conflict.
Exactly.
Because, you know, so many books that I want to talk about now, but like, whether it's man's search for meaning, whether it's pain is a part of life. Like, it's one of the most unavoidable things. You're going to experience pain. You're going to experience loss. It's not about avoiding those things, because if you avoid them, you'll create them. Like, your body, your brain is used to solving conflict. It's, you know, evolution has said, hey, I need conflict to resolve. And so when you don't have any conflict and you don't have any issues, and the biggest problems that you have are like, yeah, but you don't understand, my dad's expectations of me are so high, dude. And like, you start to invent them because there isn't anything else. And the kid that is, you know, at 7 years old, who's going to a coffee farm and harvesting coffee beans with his mother in the jungle, like, that kid isn't worried about what his expectations are. He's worried about providing for his family, because he has enough real problems that he's not inventing and fabricating.
I completely agree. And on the same token, and look, dude, I'm here with you, but on the same token, if they've never experienced struggle, they don't know what it is, and so they don't appreciate it.
Yeah.
You know, and it's frustrating. It's so frustrating, because the hardest thing you ever done is the hardest thing you ever done, right?
Yep.
And it's like, holy shit, if the hardest thing you ever had was you only got 3 fucking likes on an Instagram post. Yeah. It's really unfortunate that we're someone on the other side is sitting here busting their ass every single day to make sure that that's the only conflicts you ever have, right?
But I mean, dude, no one that I know created that scenario.
No.
You know what I mean? It's years and years and years.
Yeah.
250-ish years of that happening, of life getting better, life getting better.
What's the tipping point, though? Right? It's like, what's the tipping point?
Well, So one of the things that I loved about Sebastian Junger's tribe, and man, it's been years since I've read this book, but it's just something I use a lot of times in these conversations. But one of the things that he talks about is, we weren't designed to have 600,000 friends on Instagram.
Most definitely not.
We were designed to have between, 8 to 15 close friends and family that we valued above ourselves, our tribe. The American Indians, the worst sin that you could commit was to put yourself before the tribe, right? And so that is something that, man, being in the military, I feel like we get to have that on these. Like my first deployment was super austere, like it was super Spartan living conditions. We had nothing. Our showers were a water bottle that had been baking in the sun that we poured on us. I don't know how many months we went without washing clothes. Like we had what we had, but super Spartan living conditions. But honestly, morale was high, and even when things got bad, morale was still pretty high because we had each other, and we had built these like friendships that would last no matter what. Like even now, I've got friends from that deployment that call me up, haven't spoke to them in 10 years, and we pick right back up, laughing, carrying on, and I feel like they are just as much a brother to me as they were on that deployment. And the people we hated came together to hate more than anybody were people that put themselves above the group. And that, if you really want to look at it, like, that's how we should be voting. That's how we should be with politics. Like, man, if you think you're the only dude that can run the country, you're the only person who should be running for president, I don't want you running for president. Like, I want the guy that's like, who, me? No, that's not, this is not for me.
Yeah.
They're humble at heart. They place the group before themselves, and they view that as a service, not as a way to increase their own power. And it's the same way in your friend group. Like, you're not out searching out friends who are like, bro, look at me. Look at how awesome I am. You're not doing that. Nobody's doing that.
Yeah.
I don't know where the tipping point is, but I think getting back to the way to avoid a tipping point.
I don't think there's any getting back to it until there's a tipping point. You know what I mean? I just don't think that's what's going to, like, it takes a major catastrophe to happen for a nation divided to come together to realize that, you're still just one big ass tribe,
Yeah. Well, like we were talking about after 9/11.
Yeah,
like
we
were legit.
Or even like, this is no comparison at all, but remember when COVID first happened and everyone freaked the hell out, and there for just a second,
very brief,
just a second, it felt like, oh shit, everyone's like, okay, we got to figure this out together for a second, and then immediately went the other way. But there for a split second, I felt a fraction of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I didn't see it with that one.
No, I did. Right. But like, just for a split second, like, it was like, whether it was just a close group, like around me, not so much nationwide, but just like, people I haven't talked to, stuff, people checking on people, it was more, it wasn't
as a community.
Yeah. It wasn't we got to arm each other and, oh shit, we got to fight opposing force. Yeah. It was more like, hey, look, everyone's in a bad position right now, and dude, by no means am I comparing it, because they are not comparable at all, and dude, I will not ever do that. But like, I'm just saying, like, it takes something crazy happening almost in society for anyone to step back and not give a shit about themselves for 5 seconds.
Yeah. I agree. I mean, I agree with you. Best case scenario is not a tipping point,
Right, of course. Of course.
In my opinion.
But it's like I don't do. It seems like it's just like almost. And I've had this conversation with a lot of people on here. It's like, it's almost like a lost cause, and really just at the end of the day, it's just like, dude, we all just got to work together and try to find a common point, or common goal, and it's very fucking hard to do that.
Well, I think it's starting off as like a fad right now, but I think a lot of people are getting more and more into more into their own like responsibilities. Like, guys are like, hey, during COVID, it was like, man, I wish I had something around the house. Like, let me start a garden. And then they're getting into that. And then now that fad is like picking up.
That does spark a little bit of hope towards like, okay, everyone has a purpose bigger than themselves.
What's insane to me is because things are so easy and we don't have like real adversaries,
That's why I brought the COVID analogy up, because that's the biggest thing we've had to live against in the past 10 years, right?
Yeah.
You know?
And we're so weaponized with the political system, man. Like the blue versus red, the us versus them mentality.
Yeah, you would think by now we would figure something out better than that, you know, or a little alternative means of like getting things done.
Yeah. I wish, man. I wish. And we'll have like good, independent, you know, people come through, but then they're, you know, a lot of people are single policy voters.
Yeah.
You know, whether that's,
yeah,
I draw my hard line at abortion.
Yeah, like, yeah, if you're not for
taxes.
this, yeah, I sent some Robert Kennedy Jr. vibes over here.
Well, we've had some good.
I like that dude though. I like a lot of his stuff. The independence that I've seen, the biggest thing for me is foreign policy, you know. Yeah.
And their foreign policy, they're isolationists, and that's, unfortunately, that's just not a reality.
And that's only, and you know that because you've lived both sides.
Yeah. And I've seen Trump, for as good as some of his foreign policy was, I've seen him completely misunderstand some things in that foreign policy realm where he didn't. I understand where he was coming from. Like, oh, NATO is not contributing monetarily the same as we are. Well, like that is true, but they're also giving us a lot that maybe isn't talked about as much under the table. And it's like, dude, just take a deep breath and like talk to some of your other advisors before you start only looking at the money. And the same could be said for blue or red. I'm just using that as an example.
Yeah.
Of a lot of, like I said, if we trade out every 4 years, and I'm not saying that's a bad thing, I don't know what the answer is, but like every 4 years, you got somebody who's focused on economically, and then you got somebody who's focused on this, and then it's just hard to find that balance when you're like, well, you know what? NATO's not putting up the money. They either put up the money or I'm getting out. It's like, well, what about all the other stuff that they provide us that is extremely beneficial that we don't talk about in the news, that isn't out there on large scale? What about those things that they provide, and you're willing to waste that or risk that? And it's just difficult because he hasn't been around long enough to understand all the ins and outs.
Yeah.
And his background is economics, so that's all he looks at.
Yeah.
And I mean,
don't
even get me started
right.
on the withdrawal from Afghanistan. You know.
Well, and then on the same token, you have a career politician. It may not be the best. You know, it's
for sure.
It's a shit show. It always is, though. You know, and it's like you only have 4 years, so you're not going to get. And I don't ever really talk about politics on this, but if there's anyone I want to talk politics to, it would be you, someone who's like, okay, well, I've served and I have an opinion and I'd love to hear it. But like, you only have 4 years. You're not getting anything done in 4 years. You're starting a process, and then it's immediately going to, you know, sway it. And then you're still at the mercy of, you know, everyone who's going to back you. You know, It's not like you're going to make the decision and it's going to happen. It doesn't happen that way. And what's so funny is people are like, well, I'm voting for him because he does this, or I'm voting for him because it's like, dude, what he says doesn't fucking go. You know, at the end of the day, there still has to be someone to back it up and approve it. You know, It's not like you just make a decision and just because these policies are put in place, or this is what I'm campaigning on. How many times have you heard all these promises from anyone ever on a campaign and then nothing ever happens? One, because it was probably BS just to, you know, get the other side of the vote. Or two, it's you didn't have time to implement those things. That stuff doesn't happen overnight, you know?
Pandering, dude.
Yeah.
Whatever I got to say to get in charge.
Yeah, man, the political landscape it's annoying, unfortunate, and it's something I think we're just going to have to continue to plow through. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But also, before we wrap this thing up, I wanted to talk about like supplements and hormone replacement and all that, and you're a proponent of that, and also, so yeah, let's talk about it.
So yeah, man, I actually got a friend of mine. He's the CEO of Core Medical Group. His name's Sidney Gordon. Very close friend of mine. Kind of met each other through another Special Forces buddy of mine. But we got to be close friends. He kind of brought me on as a patient probably 5 or 6 years ago with Core Medical Group. It's one of the largest hormone replacement therapy companies in the U.S. Long story short, I've been a patient for 5 years. But he's kind of known me, knows that I'm super passionate about veterans, you know, trying to end veteran suicide, like trying to do whatever I can to help guys out. So he calls me, like I said, about 4 months ago. I'm coming back from my deployment, doing my little demo process and about to go on leave. And he calls me. It's a 15-hour drive from Fort Bragg back down to Louisiana. My wife and kids are asleep in the back seat. And I get a phone call. He's like, hey, dude, how'd it go? You know, what's going on? I'm like, man, I'm 17 years. I'm beat up. One deployment, I had torn hamstring, tore both rotator cuffs, like all kinds of problems, dude. Not to mention some problems that I've been hiding for many, many years with hip and back problems. I was like, man, I'm done. Like I'm filing for my medical retirement, and I'm going through that process now. It takes about 10 to 12 months. But I'm like, man, I'm starting my medical retirement process. And for years, he's been telling me like, hey man, if you're ever getting out, I get first dibs on hiring you. I thought that was a joke, and I was about to find out it was not. So it's like, you know, Saturday night at whatever, 7 p.m. and I'm on the road back down to Louisiana, and he gives me a call and he's like, all right, well, hey, I'm sending over, I'll email you in just a minute. I'm gonna send over this hiring packet. I've got this job that I've been waiting for you to tell me you're getting out before I started it. And long story short, he runs Core Medical Group. It's the hormone replacement therapy company, but he started the Core Medical Foundation, which is an outreach program giving back to veterans, law enforcement officers, first responders, Gold Star families. And he's like, hey, I want you to be the division director. I want you to run this outreach program. This is what I want you to do. And so, man, it's been an incredible opportunity for me. It's been like, you know, I went from having one mission set that I was all in on to being like, okay, well, I guess I'm going to be getting out. I wonder what I'm going to do for 3 hours. And then like, okay, well, I got another mission set. You know, I can put my head down and keep going, which I think is a big thing that veterans need. They lose that sense of purpose. They lose that calling, that passion that mission, that objective that they were chasing, and that goes away when they get out. He gave that to me. But being able to transition, man, we're helping out veterans with, you know, guys that need it and can't afford it. We're helping out guys with veterans, law enforcement, first responders, guys with, you know, at a minimum, lower cost. When we can raise the funds, we donate for free 20 weeks of hormone replacement therapy. One of the things that through him we've been doing is a bunch of research and stuff. We figured out that 70% of veterans that are committing suicide male veterans have a testosterone below 320. So, you know, that's a major indicator.
Yeah.
You know, and it's that.
Well, and what people don't understand about that is that creates an entirely different chemical imbalance in your head, in your brain, and how you make decisions, how you react, and everything. So
for me, man, I went and I've tried a bunch of different things with hormone replacement therapy. I went and got pellets before deployment one time. I think like our whole SF team went and got tested. I think 10 out of the 12 of us had low testosterone. 7 of us got the pellets and tried that out. 3 of us, the pellets got infected. Several of us, the pellets were falling out. For me, my testosterone, was like 185 or 190, I think, when I went and got checked. He put an incredible amount. This doctor up in North Carolina put a crazy amount of pellets in me, and my testosterone never got above 600. Yeah. So it was never like optimized, if you will. And he tried. He's like, dude, I'm uncomfortable giving you any more. So I don't know what it is, but this version of. So I ended up going over to. He didn't prescribe injectable testosterone. He said, man, you're the one patient that I've had in over 10 years of this business that I would suggest injectable. So I started hunting for injectable testosterone, and went to the VA, and it was garbage. And they only give you tests, and they give you like 0.2 milligrams,
which is nothing.
Once every 10 days. Yeah. Just super crazy, just roll of the dice. Like there's no science behind what they're doing. And then for a month, they just will be like, no, we can't refill your prescription. Yeah. Come back in 6 weeks and maybe we can fill it again. And so finally I ran into Core Medical, ran into Sydney, completely unrelated. And he was like, man, how much testosterone are you taking? And I told him, and he was like, you're obviously lying to me. He was like, look, let me get you, he said, let me get you 20 weeks of TRT. I'll give it to you for free. If I can't cut your dosage in half and double your results, don't do business with me. And so that's exactly what happened. I got on with Core Medical, and I have not changed since. I've been on with Core Medical. And so it helps being this director. Like I can, during my outreach stuff, I can go to guys and be like, dude, I know exactly what you're going through. I've tried it at the VA. You know, I know what it's like to have my hormones all over the place. And I know what it's like, because it doesn't happen overnight. But over years and years and years, you go from naturally being 900 or 1,000.
Yeah, and a crazy SOB too.
Yeah, to like this trickle down.
Yeah.
To where like I'm at 200. I didn't realize the brain fog that I was experiencing. I didn't realize how crappy the sleep that I was getting was. I didn't realize that like mentally I was not the same person anymore. I was more moody. It was difficult for me to even get in a routine. Now I was still working out, you know. As a matter of fact, the guy that gave me the pellets, that's what he said. He was like, man, I got to apologize. When you walked in here, I thought, here's another dude looking to abuse steroids.
Yeah.
He's like, because I was roughly probably 220 at the time, 225. And he's like, you know, he's like, man, I thought you're just looking to abuse it. And he's like, then I look at your blood work, your testosterone's 185. He's like, now don't come across the table.
Yeah.
But my wife's testosterone is 205.
Right.
You know, she's more of a man than you are right now. But man, finding that has been like a huge change in purpose for me. Helping people out, whether it's a civilian person who's just coming off the street and is like looking to get into that and figuring out their hormones, kind of like what we were talking about.
Yeah.
Or it's the military guys, the law enforcement guys, because there's a stigmatism around hormone replacement therapy for some reason.
It's weird, and it's something that's like I've talked about this publicly, but I've abused stuff in the past younger. It was a lot of people I know have, whether it's, from, cutting weight, fighting, doing things like the bodybuilding scene. I never was part of that, but I was lifting and doing all the workouts and all the things. And, I've seen a lot of people, and like, I can look across the room and tell you exactly who, that dude's running this, that dude's running, I can tell he's running trend, that chick's running handlebar. Like, I can tell, dude, I've been around it a long time. Yeah. And so to get off of it and like try to go like steady and like just try to get everything leveled has been an absolute nightmare for me. And like I was talking about, I'm in the process of doing the blood work and all that, and trying to get to find to where I can just finally tune myself.
Yep.
Whether it's TRT, peptides, getting to where at least I have I just want to keep one level. Yep. I don't want it to, one week I feel great and next week I feel like shit, and my performance, like I just did a PR last week and this week I can't even lift half the weight. Like, what's going on here?
And it's the level that you're looking for. So like the mood swings, the like all the bad signs and symptoms, whether you're abusing it or you lack it, right? It's all the same. That's in those big waves. Yeah. The highs and the lows. Because
abusers are more like it's a gain of access. Do you have it at this time? How did you take it? Did you run something new this time? What are your goals? Like, and then the lack of having is that like, well, dude, I got my hands on 2 bottles. I hope it's decent. I hope it's as good as the last 2 bottles I had. And how long can I make this stretch before I get any more,
Or even if you just don't realize that your test is 200.
Yeah, that too.
And you're just going through life as normal, and who you think you are right now is not who you are, but it's a result of, the sedentary lifestyle, the bad sleep that you get,
bad diet.
It's a cycle of the bad sleep, right? Because in order to create testosterone, you need good quality sleep. Mm-hmm. But what affects your production of testosterone is like high stress, right? Crazy stressful job, working shift work where you can't get into that rhythm of sleep. So you're working days and nights, cops, law enforcement,
military,
all those things, eating like crap, being forced to eat MREs, or being on the road all the time and having to eat fast food or whatever because you didn't plan it out well enough. But, and then also is, that all those things, they increase the cortisol, which increases your estrogen, which decreases your testosterone. So now you're getting less sleep, and now you're more susceptible to wanting to eat trash. And now which it just makes this cycle even worse, which leads to more cortisol, more estrogen, less testosterone. And you don't realize that over the period of 10 years, probably all these bad cycles have added up. Alcohol, it's all added to, man, my testosterone is lower than a woman's, and I would have never. I'm in the gym. I'm putting up impressive numbers, but I didn't see the brain fog. I didn't see how terrible my sleep was. I just thought that's how everybody slept. I didn't see the moodiness at times. I didn't see any of these like big signs and symptoms until finally, like, my whole team was going, and it was almost like a peer pressure thing. I was like, what? I mean, I'm sure I'm not, dude, but I'll go get it checked out. I'm like, wait, what?
Yeah.
And then even in that community of hormone replacement therapy, all of the snake oil salesmen. And
yeah, dude. And all the BS supplements and things that aren't. Yeah, dude.
And sorting through that, man, I got extremely lucky getting hooked up with Core Medical. Their team is outstanding. And I didn't get hooked up there like as a patient. I got hooked up there as a friend of the organization. And now I can say that every single employee there is like someone I genuinely would hang out with outside of work. Like that's what drew me to that organization, is how well they treat their patients. I felt like I was part of the team way before I was actually part of the team. But now using Core Medical as an outreach where we're going to other nonprofits and saying, hey, you guys are lacking funding in blood work and this, but you're treating special operations veterans, man, let us donate that. Going to, I just put on an event here at Caddo Parish on June 15th. And we put on, I trained a guy, Adam Nelson, who's a Sabine Parish sheriff's deputy years and years ago, and he passed away. We put on a memorial event for him, and all the proceeds went to his family, but it was free and open to law enforcement. And we put on an event there. But we had several individuals come out and like, hey man, I just went through a surgery, yada yada. I'm like, hey dude, this are the peptides that can help you out.
Yeah.
Hey man, we kind of talked about this, like low testosterone signs and symptoms. Like, how can I get with you? And then now these guys are like, dude, why is there a stigmatism around this? Like,
it's frustrating, man. I think it's just years and years of not just inadequate research.
Ignorance, I think.
Well, you have a product that's been out, and these other products have been out for 60 years, that there's really not been adequate research or like case by case like studies to where what are the long-term benefits for these things. It's just all performance enhancing drugs, PD, and so there's that stigmatism behind it. And it's like, well, there's a time and a place for those things,
I agree. But man, it's been an incredible opportunity. I genuinely feel like it's that mission that I wanted to make a difference. Kind of coming full circle to that. Like, I genuinely feel like I'm getting to make a difference in people's lives, whether it's through the training and camaraderie stuff that we put on, or if it's through the hormone replacement therapy, getting guys, breaking that stigmatism, being able to share my story and getting guys on to where they're like, holy shit, man, my marriage is back, and like, I'm back at work. Like, I feel like I'm back. Yeah. I'm starting to work out. And then through Core Med Foundation, I've actually recently gotten it plugged in with another organization, another nonprofit that I'm doing a lot of work with. It's called Love Inspiring Life. They're based out of Florida, and that's like an anti-human trafficking organization based out of the United States.
We're gonna have to do a whole other podcast on that, dude.
I'm excited to talk about both of those, and maybe now's not the time for it, but I'm very excited about both of those organizations and the work that we're doing in the United States and abroad. Very, very excited.
Dude, I'm excited as hell. I got to meet you today. I didn't know what to expect, honestly, but anytime someone reaches out to me that I know is like listening, supporting, or whatever, typically if they have like a suggestion, I'm like, okay, they know what my vibes are here and like what we're trying to do. So thanks, dude. Thanks for your time
Thanks
today.
for having me on, man.
Hell yeah, bro.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.